Hi and welcome. So we're going to talk about Metasploit today in this video, and I'm going to take you through what it is, what we're going to use it for, and of course from an introduction level to a somewhat I can use it level, and then you should be able to take it from there. So yeah, we have the very first room here on TryHackMe. It's called Metasploit Introduction, and it is just a small introduction to the main components of the framework Metasploit. So let me just start talking about what Metasploit is, and of course you could do the room here and open the task one and basically get the same kind of knowledge, but I feel sometimes if I talk directly to you instead of reading directly from notes, getting the actual initial start of the program and what it is just gonna go better hand in hand with knowledge on the end. So what is Metasploit, right? So really when you are hacking stuff, you're executing exploits, you're doing nmap scans, you are searching for exploits, you are hacking a Windows machine or Linux machine. Doesn't really matter in this particular case, because Metasploit is for Windows and Linux at the same time. It is a framework, right? So it's something you start up, and you start by running a command, and then you will get an interface. And if you have a free version, which is I think they call it the Metasploit framework, the open source version, then of course you can basically use the command line, free of charge, and it's gonna be really good. If you buy the pro version, right, then you can get a GUI, a graphical user interface, which is clearly with the mouse, right? So that is of course different, and compared to what you feel is necessary for you, because some people, they kind of feel that the more framework-ish something becomes, they kind of need it to be clickety-diggly even more, right? So you need to click with more, with the mouse more. I understand that, but it's gonna cost you a lot of money, and it's not gonna be worth it. So if you're just gonna use Metasploit as the normal framework, you can still update it free of charge. You can still use it free of charge, and you can use the same kind of, I don't know really what the actual limitation is. I haven't really met any, but maybe there are some, but maybe I just never. It kind of says here the commercial version is facilitates the automation and management of tasks. The version have a graphical user interface. So there is something with when things become event based. So they create an interface for it. It sometimes just become easier to use in some particular case. And when things are more text-based in a terminal, which the normal free version is, in some cases it gets a little more confusing because it doesn't have the same overview. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that kind of sentence I just said, but some people feel that way. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's wrong, but it's also not correct. But it's up to you. If you have access to the pro version, we can go ahead and take a look and take pages, and it will look something like this. So you will have a graphical user interface where you can put in your stuff, and is the mount below? No. And you can press buttons, and it's just easier to use. It's just like having Nessus. If you know Nessus, and you can do that in command line. It could be, but you will learn a lot more by the command line compared to the GUI. So I'm just gonna say that it's not gonna be worth it for you. It's gonna cost you a lot of money, but if you wish to do it, that is of course totally up to you. So what can you use Metasploit for? Well, it's an exploitation framework. So it's about scanning the target machine for vulnerabilities, and then try and execute some exploits on it, and see if you can get a command line shell on it in some way, or exploit it in some way and get some information from the server. That's really what it is. So if you wanna, for example, let's say you wanna hack a web page and there's a web exploitation, well, then Metasploit might not be for you, because that is not really what it's for. It's kind of the step up. So it's a really big framework with lots of support and lots of different things you need to understand, lots of commands created. You can actually do all the exploit within that framework. You don't really need to go away from it. So if you can do that, and you have a working exploit in it, then you can basically stay in Metasploit. It is particularly good for Windows exploitation, because when you actually got access to a Windows server, then, or machine, there are so many things different compared to Linux machines. I personally think that Linux machines are easier to exploit because it's just more logical. Windows is just like a big mess. That's why I also do not like Windows that much. But this is, of course, the Metasploit exploitation framework, so it's gonna support different things. It also said it supports all phases of a penetration testing engagement, from footprinting, information gathering, reconnaissance, what you're gonna call it, to post exploitation. It can also do, stuff like cleaning up and different kind of things. You can even encode your own payload. So if you got some firewall, evasion, it's a part of it. It can do it. You can also generate your own exploit you can run on the target server. That's really just what this is all about, and you couldn't really get that from the text here, but I think the way that I said it should probably give you a better understanding of what Metasploit framework is all about. It's about executing exploits up against a target machine, Windows, Linux, doesn't matter. You need to find the actual exploit too, which is going to take a bit, but it's the same thing every day, same thing every day. So when you go back to the task number 2 here, some main components of Metasploit, there's some things you need to understand. Now, an exploit is also called an exploit, in Metasploit. And that is the piece of code that executes the vulnerability in a certain way to exploit that server, right? That could be some, you can enumerate the SSH service for users in some way, because it will inform that the user doesn't exist, for example, in a certain special return code. And then someone created a Metasploit module for that, which is in essence your exploit as a whole thing that you can execute directly onto the server, right? Then you have something called a vulnerability. And now things gonna be a bit tricky, because that's kind of the same in some way when you say exploit, but not really. A vulnerability is a logical flaw that you will misuse in some way. So when you talk about the actual vulnerability, it could be that the server itself returns a specific return code whenever you're trying to log in with a specific user via SSH, right? But that's not really the exploit. That's just explaining what the vulnerability is. The exploit is the whole thing working. So that's. But when you're gonna explain what does the exploit do, then you really just explain the vulnerability. Payload. Now it's gonna be even more tricky, because the actual payload is a description of the piece of code that you add on to the package you sent. Now I know this is gonna be like, oh, you said the same thing 3 times. I didn't, but it sounds like in some way. The importance of you to understand the difference between these 3 things is not enormous, but it is not a bad idea to do it. And now they talk about, I'm gonna read this, Metasploit, the modules and categories, user, under each one of the lists below. These are given for reference purposes, but you will interact with them through the Metasploit console, MSF console. And then you find stuff like auxiliary, and there are supporting modules such as scanners, crawlers, fuzzers, and they can be found there. Now, don't ask too much of the naming. You know, they could call this anything, but of course, in English, at some point, if you're a native English speaker, I am not, then it might give a better understanding saying auxiliary. But I would say, in my eyes, it sounds like something different. But that is just something you need to understand, that auxiliary got these kind of different, you know, you can see down here if you write tree tag capitalized L1 auxiliary, you get a full overview of different kind of things that Metasploit can do. And then also be gathering information. It could be crawling for data, it could be analyzing something specific, or scanning something really nice. So sometimes you might not want to run Nmap individually, because you could actually run it inside Metasploit. And the good thing about it is that Metasploit also have its own database. So when you run it, it's gonna save those results in Metasploit database, so it can easier be referred to. So when you type some things and try to exploit something, some of the information and variables gonna be there for you, so it's gonna be easier. Now I want to emphasize and stress the fact that easy does not imply you learn more. If you want to learn more, understand more, you might not need to use Metasploit, you might need to do it manually. Metasploit also got the possible way to encode stuff for you. As I talked about before, if you have something that needs to be signature based to avoid the virus scanner, signature based what's it called? Signature based recognition software, then basically you need to encode it in some way so that the antivirus solutions will actually not find them. This is also a thing that Metasploit can do, and you can do that by writing this command here, and the different kind of ways to encode things. Also sometimes you need to evade stuff. So while encoders will encode the payload, right, they should not be considered directly an attempt to evade antivirus software. So encoding is really just saying that, are you blue? You're going to say, no, I'm black. Are you green? No, I'm red. Okay? But it doesn't mean that you're not identified as a color. Okay? So maybe that color could be sneaked around. So the one that identifies whether you're green, or you're blue, or you're black, or you're red, or whatever color you are, well, the payload, of course, not you, but the payload, then you might say, I'm not a color. And then just like just runs around it in a way. So really, not really just telling you how that is possible, because it's going to be like a whole topic for itself. But evasion is a possibility, and that evasion is something that, you know, this framework can also do. So it is just a big framework all in one. So it's can do many things. Now, on the other hand, you also have exploit. And there are different kind of exploits. Exploits like, you know, Firefox exploits or dial-up, you know, you can use that. Unix, Windows, stuff like that. So there are many different kind of exploits, all organized in their own folders. Now I know it's a big mouthful to take, like what is all this? So many words, so many folders, so many things. Now I want to stress and emphasize one more time, this is a framework, okay? It is not the one handy dandy tool you run with one command. You get 3 options saying exploit, destroy target, or close. No, it's not like that. This is a framework. It's an open framework. You can create your own modules. Things are written in Ruby. You see .rb. So it's a Ruby thing. So it's not even Python, it's Ruby. So I want to say that, you know, if you really want to learn a big framework and you're going to stick to one big framework for your exploitation mainly as much as possible as you can, Metasploit is the way to go. All right, so it also talks about something called knobs. It's called no operations. It's a bit difficult to talk about what a knob is, but sometimes you need to fill in blanks. Well, I'll say it this way, and that is a knob. A knob is really just telling the CPU that, oh, nothing is here, nothing to see, and I think the text here kind of says it in a really good way. So they are represented in the Intel x86 CPU family. They are represented with a 0x90 hexadecimal notation. Following the CPU will do nothing for one cycle. They often use a buffer to achieve consistent payload sizes. So yeah, that is really what they're used for, and not really gonna put more explanation to that. Also have payloads. They are the code that's being run in the system to do stuff. I've talked about before. It's a full thing. It's a full written small piece of code that's going to be executed directly on the target machine, and it's they will leverage a vulnerability on the target system. So to take leverage of it, they will use that vulnerability to achieve, well, whatever the side effect that might be. You know, it could be like destroying something or exfiltration something, or, well, who knows really what the exploit could do, but many different kind of things. Then when you talk about different kind of payloads, there are three different kind of payloads in Metasploit. The one called singles. They are often and commonly described as a self-contained payload. That's going to be like one payload that does something for itself, and just boom, that's it, done, no more, you know, run thing. Other things called stages, and they are responsible for setting up an actual connection. So they say, like, useful when working with stage payload will first upload a stage in the system, then download the rest of the payload, right? Which is why you think about this as a laddering thing. It's like, first one, you get your foot in. Next step, 2 feet in. Now, third step, get your body in. Okay? Fourth step, bring the weapon. So that is really a weaponization stage if you're going to go to the cybershell chain, right? And as stages downloaded by the stager will allow you to use larger size payloads. So a stager will go in and say, like, okay, so I got the foot in, and then it's gonna make sure that you can download more code directly on the machine, because sometimes the amount of data you can send to the target machine through this kind of vulnerability, that can be many things. I cannot give you a certain example because it's going to be generic. Then it needs to be a certain size as a maximum size, because that's just the way the exploit is. It has something to do with the code and how it's programmed and stuff like that. So really, it's a great thing to have this possibility. So it talks about Metasploit have a subtle way to help you identify single, also called inline payload, and stage payloads. And there are some different sentences here. Both are reverse Windows shells. The former is inline, single payload, indicated by the underscore between the shell. So it's gonna be between the shell and reverse, as you can see here. I know it's something you need to know, but it's it is the way that you can see this is called inline. While the latter is a stage payload, indicating by the slash between shell and reverse. So as you can see, a generic one is just the family of it. It's gonna say that the shell will be connecting directly to you, which is why reverse is the target connecting to us as hackers through TCP. This particular case here, we're gonna upload something like a shell first, and then it's gonna upload even more by having this staged ladder payload implemented, which then will get us a reverse shell. In theory, you might not feel a difference. Okay, so I'm gonna say right now, you might not feel a difference, you might not see a difference, but it's a difference, right? Post is a module usable for the final stage. So when you have your foothold, you have your exploit, you need to do post exploitation. And there are different things you can do. I don't know exactly what I should say about it, but maybe sometimes you need to create persistence, which is the act of actually being able to connect back to the machine after it's been compromised. Now, I know all this is a bit like, oh, but how are we going to do all these kind of things, Daniel? You said it all and I understand it all. And I understand that this is going to be difficult, you know. And there's actually a task here we're going to, you know, look at. So let's go close this down here. We're going to talk about the MSF console now. And the MSF console is really looking like this. Depending on whenever you started with the command MSF console, you're going to get a different banner. This is a banner, it's a cow, by the way. Sometimes it's a tank and other things. So it can be many things, really. So I just want to say that depending on when you started, and you can start it many times after each other, you're going to get different kind of banners. But it's going to start up telling you the version, the amount of exploit, the amount of auxiliary modules, post exploitations, the payloads, encoders, different kind of knobs, and different kind of invasion techniques, and some tip of the day. And then you have the Metasploit console, and this is where you're going to write your command. So what we're going to talk about now is, of course, the useful commands to get started with Metasploit. So let's go through this here. Okay, so the very first one is, of course, just writing ls. The first command is going to list the content of the folder from which Metasploit was launched. Alright, so I don't know how useful that was, but sometimes there are some things you wrote down, you need to use something. Also, you can ping directly. So you're gonna write ping-c, and then 1 for 1 ping, 3 for 3 pings, and so on, and the IP address. Well, that's a really useful command. Also clear for clearing, and you can type help, I guess, yes, to see some kind of options, and you can also use the history command to see the commands you wrote before, which is also nice sometimes. It also supports autocomplete, so that's also really nice. Let me just see more things to say about this. Yeah, okay, so it kind of jump a bit now and say, do you know the one called Eternal Blue, like a very old exploit for Windows 2012 server, I think it was, and XP machines and stuff. They're just, intentionally vulnerable just out of the box if you have those kind of operating systems. So this is just where it's going to be. We can use this. This is like use. Now this is the command you're going to use to use an exploit. So it's going to see an exploit. It's going to be on Windows. It's part of the SMP, and it's going to talk about this is the actual name. And the name of it could be anything from teddy bear to Santa Claus, but it is, of course, a bit more organized than just names like that. This would be quite silly, wouldn't it? So, when you're going to run this, you need to put in some options, which is done by using the command called show options. Then you will be presented with something like this. And the very first one is called module options. The module options usually contain something like put in the remote host IP address, even though it is in plural, it is a singular thing you need to set. And do that by typing set space rhost space and then the IP address. You can also go ahead and put in the user and the password if that is something you need. But really that is the things you need to worry on. Sometimes you will see other things you need to put in the module. I know it's a bit vague, the other things, where is that? Alright, right, so really sometimes you need to put in stuff like, you know, the port's not set. This is the R port, remote port. It could also be you need to pass in a user list and kind of things. You need to pay attention to the column called required. So if it's filled out, as you can see, you don't need to do that. But this one is filled out. This one is not filled out. So you need to fill it out in order to exploit this particular module. The payload option is also something you sometimes need to fill out, but in most cases you need to fill out your own local IP address, which is going to be your own local IP address, the interface you're going to listen on, and then the local port, which is going to be the port you're going to listen on. Okay, so sometimes it's going to give you something called exploit targets, and in this particular case, it's a Windows 7, and this is the first one, so it is already picked, so no reason to do anything there. When you fill that out, you gonna run the command, either run or the word exploit. Depending on which kind of person you are, you might feel it's better to write exploit. It feels more real, I guess. I usually just write run because it's faster and easier to type, but that is going to do the same thing for you, so it doesn't really matter. When you got your post exploitation going on, you know, it also talks about you can do that by, and now you're just gonna, you know, in this particular tutorial here on TryHackMe, they jump right on to an actual post exploitation. So I really don't think we should talk too much about it, but it's the same again with show options, and then you're going to fill it out by using the command set space, the name of the variable, space, and then the actual, you know, value of it. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about the payload command. So you can of course also show different kind of payloads. So when you're going to use this eternal blue, there is a different kind of way you can exploit it on the machine. Now this is more advanced, and I would say it's not for this particular tutorial. I don't know if I'm gonna get that far with this tutorial, but I think the important part for you is to understand how to use Metasploit, to get some success with it and start using it. Then the rest will be there. The number one flaw people usually do is by trying to understand too much of it at the same time, which is gonna totally bring it down. Alright. Alright, so that's some kind of commands you can also go ahead and play with. The back command is going to leave your current context, go on back to the console where you haven't chosen anything, so it's also kind of informational, also useful sometimes. Also, sometimes it's a good idea to use the info command for further information about a module, if that is something you need to know something about. Alright, so I think we're going to get to the part soon. We need to talk about how to search for an exploit. So there are the command called search. Now, if you go ahead and type that, you will be able to type stuff like this, and you will find different kind of exploits. Now, if you want to use one of those, there's a small line here below describing exactly how to use it, which is really nice because Metasploit is going to help you all the way. So to interact with the module by name or index, for example, use for to use exploit Windows SMB, SMB double pulsar RCE for remote code execution, which is the last one down here below. As you can see, the hashtag describes the module name, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 is the one you're going to use. Now, you don't need to type this. You can type anything. So if you want to find an exploit for Apache, go ahead and type search space Apache. Then you're going to find whatever exploits Metasploit have in its database, locally of course, about Apache. Which is also important to talk about, to update your Metasploit version and to make sure it's updated fully, because more exploits will be put into the database of Metasploit. Now, when you look at an exploit, it's going to be ranked here, normal, average, grade, and stuff like that. And depending on this ranking here, you will have more or less success exploiting with it. Now, if you take something like low ranking, it says like the exploit is nearly impossible to exploit or under 50% success rate for common platforms. So if you find something with excellent or great or good, try that first. Really, that's all about looking at the rank. So you can also go ahead and search by module, and I would consider that a bit advanced to start with, so just briefly going to talk about it. Then you can go ahead and type search, type colon auxiliary and telnet, and you get different kind of, telnet auxiliary softwares that can do stuff like, for example, detect the version of telnet. You can see in the description what it's going to do, so really no reason to look at all this to the left side. Look at the right side. It says like brocade enable login check scanner, it's SSH backdoor scanner. So it's gonna tell you if there is something there or not. You can also check the disclosure date. If you see something like 2010, it's probably not gonna be there in any system these days. But sometimes you're gonna meet a server that's gonna be highly outdated. So who knows? Now that we talked about a lot of theory and a lot of things to get a good stand, a good foothold here. Oh, wow, that's a long scroll. It's called working with modules. And working with modules is the place going to take you through all of this down here below to answer the questions of which kind of local port, how we just set it, and we all already talked about it. Now, this is not really an explanation on autocomplete, but you really need to do this by hand in order to understand it. So what we're going to do is, this particular case here, it says like you can launch the target machine attached to the room, replicate the example shown below in a Metasploit version 5 or 6. We'll have menus on screen similar to the shown below, and now just when you enter the context of the module, use command following, blah blah blah. So you will log into whatever, and then you're gonna write the msf console command, and then you can go ahead and use your Metasploit console commands directly in the command line. What it's gonna talk about now is that you might want to try and exploit something here. I'm just briefly going to see if it wants us to exploit the eternal blue. I don't remember in this particular room here. So I guess this is going to be like taking you through this room slowly and easy. And if that is the case, then eternal blue is the one we will execute. I'm just briefly going to see what's going on here. Yeah, so this particular server here is an eternal blue server we're going to exploit. It also tells you here that we're going to use the example below, use the following flow, Gonna use this exploit there. I'm gonna set the R host. You can also use the setg command to set values we use for all modules. And if you're gonna do that, you know, that is of course up to you, but I really prefer setting values individually, which is what I was gonna show in this video when I do this with you. And the general idea here is to fill out the information we need, and then run the command called exploit, or run depending on which one you're going to use. It's an alias, it is for exploit. So the exploit command can be used without the parameters.c. H4c run the command in the background and open the session as soon as it opens. So if you write that, exploit-c, it's going to show you all these kind of interesting lines. Now the one you're going to look for is when it says session opened. Whenever you see that, you will clap your hands because you have success, right? Then the exploit worked and you got through it all. Then you will get some sort of session, but pay attention to the one here called it is in the background. So in order to use the session, you need to access it. And the way you access it is go ahead and write the word sessions in the command prompt, because you can see you're still here in the Metasploit command prompt. Then you're going to get the different kind of sessions, and then you can use it by saying sessions tag I and then the number of the session, and then it's going to bring you into something called Meterpreter. And the Meterpreter is really what you want. This is what Metasploit is all about. When you have the Meterpreter going, it basically means that you own the machine. You won. You have access now. Now you're gonna begin all your stuff called post-exploitation, creating persistence, exfiltration data, all different kind of things is what you're gonna do now. So when you want to go back to Metasploit away from the session that is open, think about it as a session as an open SSH connection in a way. Then you can write background, sorry, and then it's gonna background your session. I want to stress that even though the Metasploit is a highly advanced framework, sometimes a flaw will happen, and that flaw will basically close your session or something like that. But you know, fear not, just run exploit again, open the session, and you're back. So this is really what this is all about, and we're gonna try and do that now. So I'm gonna with you start the server machine, and I'm gonna go to my command prompt. Go ahead and write msf console, and we're gonna start Metasploit console up, and you're gonna do that with me now. As you see, now we have a cow say. It's a cow, and it says Metasploit. I'm using the version of 6.03 in this current moment. I'm running this piece of software, and you see you have different kind of exploits, auxiliary modules, post exploitations, payloads, encoders, and observations. And now we can go ahead and type clear. I'll go ahead and type help, and when you type help, you will see examples of different kind of things. You can also go ahead up and see some of the more easier commands. Developer commands, not important for you. If you have access to the machine and you have a Meterpreter running already, you know, some of these commands here are gonna be relevant for you. But for now, most of these commands here is not relevant for you. Sometimes you've gained access to Windows machine, you need to elevate your own privileges in some way, and there are different ways to do that in Metasploit. But in this particular case, I'm just gonna we're gonna do exactly what it says in the tutorial. Going back to the tutorial, we have the IP address set, and we can go ahead and copy that and go and type ping-c, put the IP in, and it's not gonna eat the, it's a 1, I missed the 1, so it's pinged the IP address and we have access to it, the server is up. The exploit we're gonna use here is called Eternal Blue, so I guess we can use the step-by-step guide here below. Say 1, I'm going to use this. So go ahead and copy paste this, and you can type search and put it in, and it's going to show you the exploit here from Eternal Blue in 2017, the one that talked about in the tutorial. You can see the rank is average because it is something that got patched pretty fast, but there are still quite a deal of machines out there that still have these kind of systems installed, so it is ranked average, which is kind of an okay ranking. You can see that it's under exploit Windows SMB, and then you have exploit there. It is ranked, it is on the first and the only exploit level, so we can type use 0 and press enter. And then Metasploit is gonna say like, it's gonna use the default payload. It's called Windows x64 Meterpreter, which is good. Reverse TCP. It's a generic one, but it's fine. It's gonna work. I'm gonna go ahead and type show options now, and we need to fill out the rhost. So set rhosts. Put in the IP address that I need to copy paste one more time. Put it in. And I need to put in the ones that are not filled out. They are all filled out now. Also, I see localhost. Is that me? Let's go ahead and write it if config. I have this particular IP address. It filled out the IP address of me, the etc0. Now, the network interface we're going to use, because we're connected to through OpenVPN to TryHackMe, we can write set lhost, small letter set, lhost, ton0, because that is the interface card. And then we can go ahead and write show options one more time to see what we typed. And then you can see that the current one is called ton0. You can also go ahead and type your IP address if you want to do that. But this should work just as well as before. And now we're just going to type exploit -c. It's going to exploit on the machine, running some code, sending all but the last fragments to exploit the package. Things look fine. Sending this and that. Storage, sending more. So you can see that it does something. It sends something as a stage. This is a staged exploit. And now it says session will create in the background. Sessions. Then we see the session. It's on Windows, on Jon's PC. Sessions, tag I. 1. Unknown session. Is it what? Unknown session. So you're gonna get unknown session now. So what you're gonna do is go back and see what did we forget. So it says sessions, and we've got sessions tag I, and what we wrote is sessions. I need to do it in plural, sessions tag I, and now we have the interpreter. I can go ahead and write ls or de, because it's a Linux system. What we're gonna do now is to go down here and say like, we done. That's really the first step of Metasploit, nothing more to do. So we exploited it all, we got access to the machine, and now we need to do different kind of things. Now you remember, we can go ahead and type background. Then we can type help one more time. And you remember you got the command you can run, you probably remember it, called creds, list all credentials in the database. That's kind of interesting. And you're thinking, I want to try and run some of the commands now. Could we just try that? Well, I don't know how far you can get in this TryHackMe machine, but go ahead and try as much as you want to. I'm just looking at if anything here is gonna... No, not really. Let's see. Root set. Nah, not really anything I think in particular. So let's go ahead and just write sessions one more time. Sessions tag I 1, and now we're back. And we can see that. We can also type get info, I think it is, or is it, what is it? Get UID. And we can see that we are the NT authorities system. And this is not that bad. Also get desktop, and then you can get the session of it, and many different kind of things, like get environment, just running commands now, no variables. So try yourself and see what you're gonna get. Also go ahead and try and type user, for example. What about password? No, don't hold yourself back. Use the tab button to autocomplete. Try and learn something. So we're just gonna say that you hope you learned something this video. I'm gonna see you again online at some point, and I'm gonna return with another video about Metasploit at some point. But this was the introduction one. It's a long video, but I really hope you learn something and you can use it for something. Have a nice day and see you again.